once you've decided who's going to be in this, the process of interviewing, I think, is the most crucial part of doing the storytelling. So the way I prefer to do it is to call people on the phone first. I'd rather talk to them at a little bit of a distance than I would in person the first time, because when I meet them to film them, I kind of want that to be a fresh feeling for them. So what I do, I spend either maybe 2 or 3 phone calls. I try to bond with them on the phone initially so they get a sense that they're comfortable with me. I've already done a little bit of research about them, so I know what things to ask, but in that process of that initial interview, I'm going to find out a little bit more about what their story is, what kinds of things I want to, I'm getting an idea for what I'm going to talk to them about in the interviews, so that when we're rolling, I'm not fishing for information and perhaps missing something really important because they're nervous in front of the camera and they're not going to tell me once the camera's rolling, but I'll be able to remind them because I heard it earlier. And then also, I'm listening for ideas for visuals on how I'm going to cover this. So if the guy says, I'm talking to some guy and he says, I was walking my dog and I just had this amazing idea about how I was going to cure cancer with this particular vaccine, or so she said that. And of course I'm getting a shot of her walking her dog perhaps when we do this. But that's way, when I walk out there, especially if I have limited time to shoot, limited time to tell the story, I'm not going in cold and going, okay, now what am I going to cover this with? Also in that process, when you're arranging the location, you want to talk to that person about, say they're doing some research. It's like, okay, can we film in your lab? What are you doing in the lab? All the kinds of things that you can think of that are going to illustrate the story. You want to ask them then, get some sense of how you're going to tell the story visually, and then perhaps how you're going to where you're going to do the interview and how you're going to set that up. When you actually get to the interview, I think the biggest thing is that you want to make sure that that person is relaxed and comfortable, because you're pointing a camera at them. It's much like I'm feeling right now, because I'm looking at a bunch of people and it makes me really nervous, and so it's hard to talk. And so when I'm interviewing someone, my job being behind the camera is to make them feel that they're just talking to me about something. And so you want to, as you're setting up and you're getting ready to do it, you want to have a conversation with them while you're getting ready to go. You don't want to start talking about the topic. You don't want them to say the best thing they've ever said before the camera's rolling, because they'll never say it the same way again. So what you want to do is, say you walk into, you're going to film in their office. You walk in, you're looking around the room for visual cues about that person that maybe you didn't know already, so that you can start having a conversation and get them comfortable with you. So maybe they have their degree on the wall and it's like, oh, well, so did you grow up in New Hampshire, or did you just go to college there, that kind of thing. When you are thinking about where to film it, you also want to think a lot about how you're positioning that person. You'll see interviews standing, sitting, whatever, but there's that whole thing of when you're standing, it's kind of a flight or fight thing. When you're sitting, you're thinking more sort of in a reasoned way, and when you're lying down, you're dreaming, but you're not going to interview someone lying down. So anyway, so most people are going to be comfortable sitting, looking at you, talking to you as if it's a conversation, and you kind of want to go for that. If you can also think about having them do something that involves the story. Like, for example, maybe you've interviewed them sitting down, you've got the emotional parts or you've got the factual parts, and you can ask that person to show you something about, perhaps they're looking at an x-ray of something and they're showing you, well, this is how we put the catheter in, and this is what we did for Mr. Jenkins, and we did this and now he's cured. So a little show and tell like that also makes a nice break in the interview, and it's really helpful if you don't have a lot of cover footage.